Hey everybody, we are back. How's it going? Did you enjoy the snow? Did you feel like listening to Christmas music today? It was crazy waking up to that and then having to go and scrape off my car. It was weird. So weird. It's March. I don't know. Anyway, here we are. Oh, I saw some of your videos about asking about my socks when you were acting like you're a teacher, acting like one of the teachers. I thought that was very funny, and thank you for thinking of me. All right, here we go. Chapter 10, Shadow Wounds. So we are back at Fablehaven with Seth. Seated on a chair on the deck, Seth examined the checkerboard in disbelief. Tanu had just jumped 2 of his checkers and now outnumbered Seth 7 pieces to 3. But that was not the cause of his amazement. Seth re-examined his potential move. He put his hand on one of his 2 kings and jumped 6 of Tanu's pieces, zigzagging around the board. He looked up at Tanu. The Samoan stared back with wide eyes. "You asked for it," Seth laughed, removing all but one of Tanu's red checkers. Tanu had already beaten him twice in a row, and things had been looking grim until the coolest move he had ever found opened up. "I used to think triple jumps were the ultimate." "I've never seen so many jumps in one move," Tanu said, a smile creeping onto his face. "Wait a minute," Seth said. "You set me up! You did that on purpose!" "What?" Tanu said with too much innocence. "You wanted to see if you could create the biggest jump in the history of checkers. You must have been maneuvering the whole time to set that up." "You're the one who found the move," Tanu reminded him. "I know pity when I see it. I'd much rather strike out than have somebody pitch to me underhand. Is this your way of getting back at me for always going first?" Tanu grabbed a handful of popcorn from a wooden bowl. "When you're black, you say coal before fire. When you're red, you say fire before smoke. How can I keep up with that?" "Well, even if you staged it, jumping 6 guys felt pretty good," Seth said. Tanu's smile revealed part of a kernel caught between his teeth. "The longest possible jump would be 9, but I'm not sure I could make that happen during an actual game. 5 was my previous best." "Hello," came a voice from the edge of the yard, made smaller by the distance. "Stan? Seth? Are you there? Hello?" Seth and Tanu both looked toward the woods. Doran, the satyr, stood beyond the perimeter of the lawn, waving both arms. "Hi, Doran," Seth called. "What do you think he wants?" Tanu asked. We better go check," Seth said. "Hurry," Doran urged. "Emergency." "Come, Mendigo," Tanu said. The overgrown puppet followed as Seth and Tanu vaulted the deck railing and ran across the yard to the satyr. Doran's face was red and his eyes were puffy. Seth had never beheld the jovial satyr in such a state. "What is it?" Seth asked. "Newell," the satyr said. "He was napping. Those foul little nipsies had their revenge on him, accosted him in his sleep." "How is he?" Tanu asked. Doran grabbed fistfuls of his hair and shook his head. "Not good. He's changing, I think, like the Nipsies changed. You've got to help him. Is Stan around?" Seth shook his head. Grandpa had gone with Grandma, Dale, and Hugo to negotiate with Nero, hoping the cliff troll could provide some information by using his seeing stone. "Stan is away for the afternoon," Tanu said. "Describe what is happening to Newell." "He woke up screaming with evil Nipsies on him like fleas. I helped him brush them off, but not before they inflicted lots of tiny wounds on his neck, arms, and chest. Once we drove them out, careful not to kill them, we thought all was well. His injuries were plentiful, but minuscule. We even had a laugh about it and started laying plans for a counterattack. We figured we could pack their grandest palaces with dung." "Then Newell took a turn for the worse?" Tanu prompted. "Not long afterward, he started sweating and acting delirious. Felt like you could fry an egg on his forehead. He lay down and soon he started moaning. When I left him, he seemed tormented by dark dreams. His chest and arms were looking hairier." "We might be able to learn something by observing him," Tanu said. "How far away is he?" "We have a shelter over by the tennis courts," Doran said. "He wasn't too far gone when I left him. Maybe we can reverse it. Potions are your specialty, right?" I'm not sure what we're up against, but I'll try, Tanu said. Seth, go back to the house and wait for— No way, Seth said. He's my friend. It isn't far. I've been good lately. I'm coming. Tanu tapped a thick finger against his chin. You've been more patient than usual these past few days, and it might be unwise to leave you alone. Your grandparents might have my head, but if you promise to let Mendigo return you to the house without complaint on my order, you can join us. Deal, Seth exclaimed. Lead the way, Tanu told Doran. The satyr took off at a brisk pace. They raced along a path that Seth knew, having visited the tennis court many times over the summer. Newell and Doran had built the grass court, and Warren had provided top-notch equipment. Both of the satyrs were quite adept at the sport. Before long, Seth had a stitch in his side. For such a big man, Tanu could cover ground quickly. The run did not seem to tire him. Newell is in the shed? Seth panted as the tennis court drew near. Not the equipment shed, Doran replied, not at all winded by the running. We keep shelters all over the preserve. Never know where you might decide you want to rest your head. It isn't far from the court. Mendigo, carry Seth, Tanu ordered. The wooden puppet scooped Seth into his arms. Seth was mildly offended. Tanu hadn't even bothered to ask his permission. The court was not much farther. Even though being carried was a relief and it allowed Tanu and Doran to pick up their pace a little, Seth wished he had been the one to suggest it. He disliked feeling underestimated. They left the path, tromped through some undergrowth, and emerged on the immaculate lawn of the freshly chalked tennis court. Without pause, Doran dashed across the court and plunged into the trees beyond. Branches whipped past Seth as Mendigo raced along behind the others, dodging around trees and bushes. Finally, a tidy wooden shack came into view. The walls looked weathered and splintery, but there were no gaps or cracks, and the solid door fit snugly. There was a single window beside the door with 4 panes and green curtains behind it. A stovepipe protruded through the roof. When they reached the tiny clearing where the shack stood, Mendigo dumped Seth on his feet. Keep your distance, Seth, Tanu warned, approaching the shack with Doran. The satyr opened the door and entered. Tanu waited on the threshold. Seth heard a vicious snarl, and Doran came flying out the door backward. Tanu caught him, stumbling away from the doorway as he absorbed the airborne satyr's momentum. A shaggy creature emerged from the shack. It was Newell, and yet it was not Newell. Taller and bulkier, he still walked upright like a man, but dark brown fur covered him from horns to hooves. The horns were longer and blacker, corkscrewing up into sharp points. His face was almost unrecognizable. The nose and mouth having fused into a snout, quivering lips peeled back to reveal sharp teeth like a wolf's. Most disturbing were his eyes, yellow and bestial with horizontally slit pupils. Growling savagely, Newell pounced from the doorway, hurling Tanu aside and tackling Doran. Newell and Doran rolled across the ground. Doran gripped Newell by the neck, muscles straining to keep those snapping teeth away. Mendigo, immobilize Newell, Tanu called. The lumberjack raced toward the struggling satyrs. Just before Mendigo reached them, Newell wrenched free from Doran, caught one of the puppet's extended arms, and flung him through the air into the shack. Then Newell charged Seth. Seth realized he had no way to fend off the vicious satyr. Running would buy him only a few seconds and would take him farther from the help of others. Instead, he crouched, and when Newell had almost reached him, he dove forward at Newell's legs. The tactic surprised the raging satyr, who tripped over Seth and did a somersault before regaining his feet. The side of Seth's head throbbed where a hoof had clubbed him. He looked up at Newell in time to see Tanu slam into him from the side, smashing the satyr to the ground like a linebacker with permission to kill. Just really quick, there's Newell. You see the picture? Crazy. Crazy, crazy. Newell recovered swiftly, rolling away from Tanu and rising to a crouch. Newell leaped at Tanu, who sidestepped the lunge and wrapped the crazed satyr in a full Nelson, arms twined under Newell's armpits and locked behind his neck. Newell struggled and squirmed, but Tanu bore down on him ruthlessly, using brute strength to maintain the hold. Mendigo and Doran rushed toward the combat. After a loud cry between a roar and a bleat, Newell craned his head and sank his teeth into Tanu's thick forearm. Jaws clamped shut. Newell twisted and ducked, heaving Tanu over the top of himself, breaking the hold and sending the Samoan sprawling. Doran charged his mutated friend, but Newell backhanded him with a crack like a gunshot, and Doran flopped to the ground. Then Newell danced away from Mendigo. Twice Newell grabbed for the giant puppet, but Mendigo dodged him. Dropping to all fours, Mendigo skittered back and forth in a spidery crawl before moving in and entangling Newell's legs. Stomping and kicking, the enraged satyr broke free, leaving Mendigo with a splintered arm. "Go!" Doran shouted, rising, his cheek already swelling. "We can't win this. It's too late. I'll hold him off." Tanu tossed a small, unstopped bottle to Seth. Liquid sloshed from its mouth as he caught it. "Drink," Tanu said. Seth upended the bottle and guzzled the fluid. It fizzed and bubbled as it went down with a sour, fruity taste. Newell rushed at Doran, who turned, planted his hands on the ground, and bucked his friend in the chest with both hooves. The blow sent Newell soaring. "Run, Doran," Tanu urged. "Don't let him bite you. Mendigo, help me back to the yard as fast as you can." The lumberjack dashed to Tanu, who climbed on piggyback. Mendigo did not look sturdy enough to carry such a large man, but he took off at a fast pace. Seth felt tingly all over, almost as if the carbonation of the potion was now gurgling through his veins. Snorting and rising, Newell directed his attention towards Seth, pouncing with teeth bared and arms outstretched. Seth tried to run, but although his legs moved, his feet could get no traction. Newell passed right through him, and bubbling tingles erupted through Seth's body. As the effervescent sensation subsided, Seth noticed that his body was pulling back together. He was in a gaseous state. "Newell," Doran said sharply, backing away from his deranged friend, "why are you doing this? Come to your senses." Newell sneered. "You'll thank me later." "Leave me be," Doran said gently. "We're best friends." "Won't take long," Newell growled in his guttural voice. Seth tried to say, "Come and get me, you goat-faced psycho," but although the mouth could make the right shapes, no sound came out. Roaring, Newell rushed at Doran, who turned and ran in the opposite direction from where Tanu was heading. Apparently, Newell was more interested in chasing his friend than pursuing the Samoan, because he did not even glance at Tanu and Mendigo. Doran crashed away through the undergrowth with Newell in close pursuit. Seth noticed for the first time that a slender cord of shadow was connected to Newell. The curling black line wound out of sight into the trees. Seth was left alone in the small clearing, hovering a few inches above the ground, wispy particles of himself steaming from his body without ever truly dissipating. He tried again to move, swinging his arms and legs. Although he did not generate any more traction than he had previously, Seth began to glide forward. He soon found that it was not moving his arms or legs that mattered. All it took was the intent to move in a certain direction, and he gradually began to drift that way. Arms hanging at his side, legs dangling motionless, Seth slowly glided after Tanu, hoping to reach the house before solidifying in case Newell decided to return. In his gaseous state, Seth could have abandoned paths and traveled in a straight line through the woods, but the paths were fairly direct, and he didn't particularly enjoy the sensation of dissolving around branches and other obstructions. With his top speed barely matching the pace of a leisurely stroll, he remained anxious throughout the tedious journey. He worried about how Tanu was doing and whether Doran had outrun Newell, and what to do if Newell reappeared. But Newell did not return, and Seth remained gaseous until he drifted across the yard and up onto the deck. Tanu opened the door and admitted Seth to the house. Mendigo waited nearby, a deep split in one wooden forearm. Tanu looked worried. "Did Doran make it away?" he asked. Unable to speak, Seth shrugged and crossed his fingers. "I hope so too. I think my wound is going to be a problem. Look." Tanu held up his beefy arm. There was no blood, but much of the forearm looked like shadow instead of flesh. "Oh no," Seth mouthed. "It's turning invisible," Tanu said, "like what happened to Coulter, only slower. The invisible portion has been spreading. I have no idea how to slow it." Seth shook his head. "Don't worry," said Tanu. "I didn't expect you to have the answer." Seth shook his head more vigorously, making the particles of his face disperse with fizzy tingles. He drifted over to a shelf and pointed at a black binder, then pointed at Tanu's arm. You want me to take notes about my arm? I'll let you inform the others. You'll solidify soon. Seth looked around the room. He glided over to a window where the light of the sun was making a flower pot cast a shadow. He pointed at the shadow, then indicated Tanu's arm. Shadowy? Tanu asked. Understanding suddenly registered in his expression. My arm looks shadowy to you, not invisible, like how you see Coulter as a shadow man. Seth gave Tanu a thumbs up. I'd better go outside in case I turn evil like Newell. Tanu walked out to the deck. Seth floated along behind him. They stood together, silently staring into the yard. A frothy sensation surged through Seth, tickly tingles everywhere, as if he were a bottle of soda that somebody had shaken until it was wildly foaming over. After a fizzy hiss, the tingling stopped, and he found himself standing on the deck, his body solid once more. That was pretty cool, Seth said. Unique sensation, isn't it? Tanu said. I have only one gaseous potion left. Come with me. I want to try something. I'm sorry about your arm, Seth said. Wasn't your fault. I'm glad you avoided getting nipped. They descended the stairs from the deck, passing from underneath the overhang into direct sunlight. Wincing and clutching his shadowy forearm, Tanu fled into the shade. I was afraid of that, he growled through clenched teeth. Did it hurt? Seth asked. Coulter said he couldn't visit us until sundown. I think I just confirmed why. When the sunlight hit my arm, the invisible part burned with unbearable cold. I can hardly imagine how that would feel spread over my whole body. Maybe I should wrap my arm and go find a shady spot far from the house. I don't think you'll turn evil, Seth said. You have a reason? Tanu asked. Newell didn't behave like himself, Seth said. He was out of control, but Coulter acted calm. He seemed normal except for being a shadow. Coulter may just be more devious than Newell, Tanu said. He might have pounced on us if we'd given him the chance. Tanu held up his arm. The area from his wrist to his elbow was lost in shadow. It's spreading faster. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He sat down heavily on the deck chairs. Across the lawn, Seth saw Grandpa Sorensen emerge from the woods. Behind him came Dale, and then Hugo, giving Grandma a ride on his shoulder. Grandpa, Seth called. Tanu got hurt. Grandpa turned and said something inaudible to Hugo. The golem picked him up, steadied Grandma, and loped across the lawn. Dale ran along behind. Hugo set Seth's grandparents down beside the deck. Tanu raised his injured arm. What happened? Grandpa asked. Tanu recounted the incident with Newell, telling how the satyr had changed, how he had attacked them, how they had gotten away, and how the injury looked shadowy to Seth. Grandma knelt by Tanu, inspecting his arm. A single bite did this? She asked. It was a big bite, Seth said. Small injuries from nipsies were enough to transform Newell, Tanu said. How are you feeling? Grandma asked. Feverish. The shadow had cloaked all of his hand except the fingertips and was also spreading up his arm. I don't think I have much time. I'll give Coulter your best. We'll do all we can to restore you, Grandpa promised. Try to resist any evil inclinations. I'll give you 2 thumbs up if you can trust me, Tanu said. I'll try with everything I have not to deceive you with that gesture. Can you think of a better way to prove I'm still on your side? I can't think of much else you could do, Grandpa said. He'll have to stay out of the sun, Seth said. It's painfully cold to him. The sun didn't appear to affect Newell, Grandma asked. No, Seth said. Nor did it slow the fairies who came after Seth, Grandpa said. Tanu, stay on the deck until sundown. Confer with Coulter when he arrives. Later, if I can hang on to my wits, I'll explore the preserve, see what I can find, Tanu mumbled, his mouth twisting into a grimace. Did you learn anything from Nero? We found him injured on the floor of the ravine, pinned beneath a heavy log, Grandpa said. Apparently, he had been set upon by dark dwarves. They stole his seeing stone and much of his treasure. He couldn't tell us how the plague originated. The injuries he had sustained did not appear to be transforming him in any way. Hugo moved the log, and Nero was able to scramble back up to his lair. Tanu began breathing heavily, eyes squeezed shut, sweat trickling down his face. His entire arm was lost in shadow. Sorry to hear it was a bust, he wheezed. Better get inside just in case. Grandpa placed a reassuring hand on Tanu's healthy shoulder. We'll get you back. Good luck. He stood up. Hugo, I want you in the barn standing guard over Viola. Be ready to come if we call. The golem strode away toward the barn. Dale patted Tanu's good shoulder. Grandpa led the others into the house, leaving Tanu groaning on the deck steps. Can't we do anything for him? Seth asked, peeking out the window. Not to prevent what is happening, Grandma said, but we won't rest until we get Tanu and Coulter back. Dale busied himself examining Mendigo's fractured arm. Did you see any darkened creatures on your way to Nero? Seth asked. Not one, Grandpa said. We kept to paths and moved quickly. I didn't realize how fortunate we were until now. If we determine that we can trust Tanu and Coulter, we may attempt a final excursion in the morning before sunrise. If not, it may be time to consider abandoning Fablehaven until we can return armed with a plan. Don't ignore help from Tanu and Coulter just because you need me there in order to see them, Seth pleaded. Like it or not, I must take that into consideration, Grandpa said. I'll not place you in jeopardy. If I'm the only one who can see them, maybe it means there's something only I can do to help them, Seth reasoned. There may be more important reasons for having me come than simply as a means to follow them. It may be our only hope for success. I won't rule it out, Grandpa said. Stan, Grandma said reproachfully. Grandpa turned to face her, and her expression softened. Did you wink at her? Seth asked. Are you just trying to shut me up? Grandpa regarded Seth with an amused expression. You get more perceptive every day. All right, that's the end of the chapter for today. I hope you guys have a great day. The sun was out for a little bit, so I don't know if you can get outside and play or do something fun today, but I will see you guys next time. Bye!